So oftentimes when you play MMO games, there's often a community involved which has a relations between the game players and the publishers of the game, or as well the developers. Now recently, as you guys know, there's been a feature in this game here, Allods Online, which is known as a faction change, which allows other players to change sides, and as a result, there has been an extreme imbalance. Now, players have often tried to give their opinions to try to fix the problem, but it seems like a lot of players in this community specifically feel that the GMs aren't really listening and that everything is going on deaf ears. So what we thought we decided to do is just create this video where people can share their opinions, just to give some examples of why people think, for example, their opinions aren't being heard and if what they're saying even matters. So let's start out here. As you can see, one of the controversies in terms of bias in this game is the faction change and the fact that one side, which is known as the Empire, gets free skills in this game that requires gold in currency, whereas one side, the League, does not. And one side is arguing it doesn't make a big difference, they should keep it, whereas the other side is arguing it creates imbalance. So a person like you, Muzza, you say this is creating an imbalance and it should be gotten rid of, for example, is that correct?
Yeah, it's definitely not fair for the 50% or arguably more, according to the GMs, who don't have the skills for free and have to pay them.
Here's an interesting point, for example, as everybody knows, this game is not developed in North America, it's developed by a company in Russia, and we are behind, is it about 4 patches, I believe, is that correct?
Something around there, yeah. Yep.
So in that sense, some would argue that is why your opinions don't really matter, because they already made these changes and we're just waiting to have them implemented. So do you guys agree in that sense, like your opinions don't matter basically?
I still think there needs to be some sort of testing phase going on, because we're a completely different market.
Yeah.
Different sized population, different, I assume, different spending. Completely different environment, and to assume that every mechanic is going to work in the same way it has in Mother Russia is just a bit naive, I think.
Yep, totally agree with that one. As I said it before, it's just because the market actually recovered in Russia doesn't mean it's going to recover in here. What works in Russia might not work in here either, and same thing with the European, like Allied Europe or Allied Spain or I don't know what else. So bad, I mean, the only thing that could have happened, the GM could have, because at the moment they're saying they can't remove it. So the question in my mind is, why taking too long? Why is 2 months plus? I mean, like, were you waiting? Like, at the moment, even if you remove the buff, it's a bit too late. The damage and the impact from it already happened.
So for this scenario, for example, if I'm not mistaken, since Gpotato says they are the publisher, for example, that gamers should not be screaming at them to try to get changes because they can't do anything about it. So I guess in a sense you can say, since they're just a publisher and this is a free-to-play game, the only thing they can really control is the price of the cash shop items. So how does that make you guys feel, for example, when they make, statements like that where they have no control, so you can't really do anything about it?
Well, they can't even control the cash shop prices, because the holy boxes, they were saying they're going to be 35 Gpots for the longest time, and then, oh, what happened? They're 50 gold or 50 Gpots all of a sudden. And then they turn around and say, oh, well, Russia said we can't do anything about it and it's out of our control. So
that's a bigger crap.
And that is one of the controversies too, where before, as you all know, they did make a promise that these holy boxes should be at a certain price, but then all of a sudden they said, sorry, they have no real choice because it would jeopardize a different market. Whereas if you look, for example, in the European sites, for example, they actually stopped that item from even being released because apparently the community was really against it. So it really makes you wonder, is this true that they have no control over things like this, or are they just saying that from a business point of view so that they continue to make profit, so to speak?
I try not to be too much of a pessimist with this. I'm not sure how long they've had the free nurse skills for, but at least there is some movement to take it away. It's not going to be occurring into the future. I mean, people say we've lost a lot of people, but we still do have a lot, and if they do make some correction, it's at least not going to make the situation worse, I guess. And rather than looking at it in a sort of, there's no hope for us now sort of perspective, which I think a lot of people are taking.
Taking it away, as I said, not gonna make any difference, because again, people already bought the Ferrari or whatnot, so
I think they've already took the biggest risk in implementing the faction change, so what harm can trying to balance it out now do?
Well, if they want to keep the game going and they want to still make profit out of what the game is, so of course they want to continue changing what they could, if only they want the game to continue.
I mean, even though that these guys are like promoting Empire side with their interviews or whatnot, the thing is, the Empire has the majority of the stronger player. If the player wants to come in and not suffer, they have really no choice but to go Empire.
And at the same time, I think, is everyone in agreement when it comes to things like a faction change, it only really works if a game has a certain amount of population to support it, if that makes sense?
I agree with that.
And in general, what is your guys' definition of balance, for example? Is it, for example, definition of balance is having X amount of players, for example, so they have to be even numbers, like that is balanced? Or do you consider balance more as, for example, how many powerhouses there are on each faction? So I think that's one of the things that people are trying to find too, whereas their definition of balance might just be numbers, where you as the game player, it's more about what people can accomplish and what they do accomplish.
Well, this is my argument that I put to everyone. Pio said the purpose of the buff was to provide balance between the two factions, and in my mind it's a really easy test, whether or not you keep the buff. Is it working? Is there balance? Is balance being created? You look at the situation, it's no different from what we had before the change, and in fact it's gotten worse. So you'd have to say that isn't balance, and why do we have the buff if it isn't meeting its intended purpose or sort of requirement for being there?
Well, another thing with balance is it's gotta be effective numbers. It's kind of an awkward thing to work out, but it's gotta be how many people are actually making a difference when it comes to faction versus faction, and how many are just sitting in Novigrad AFK on Facebook. Not to mention, with the current faction change, from what I was told by a GM that Eartha posted, apparently if you make any level tune on either side and log into it once, I don't know for how long, but that tune is going to count as a population number, which doesn't do anybody any good, because if not, there are probably people out there abusing it, making it tunes.
I would say, for my honest opinion, in many ways, I believe those buffs, they do give an unfair advantage, because it does require a lot of gold, for example, that, like everyone says, you could be using it to make yourself stronger in different avenues. So regardless of how much one wants to downplay it, it does give them an unfair advantage, and it doesn't really help the game, so to speak, if their intent is to try to make it more competitive and interesting to attract a larger audience. At the same time, I will semi-agree with one point, where a lot of it in terms of the faction side in some ways does have to do with just player management, like just what people want to do. Like, for example, in this game, for example, you do have to player versus player a lot in order to accomplish, and I know there's a lot of people, that exist in one side that just don't want to do things like that, so they just try to avoid it all the time, which kind of, creates kind of an imbalance as well, where they're taking up resources but they aren't really using it in a way that's intended to kind of keep balance in that sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've been saying for a while that the mechanics which are being used by some of the guilds, you know, around things such as AC, where rather than fighting, they protect themselves using gold, or there's not a willingness to sort of play the game, so to speak. And it's definitely creating an environment where the league isn't helping itself, but at the same time, it's not a good idea to be introducing additional mechanics which don't make the problem any better, if that makes sense.
As a publisher, they should not let this thing go for months. The whole system needs to rescale and refix, to be honest. So
basically, they need some consulting from actual gamers that play the game.
Isn't that what the feedback section's for?
No,
dude,
the feedback is fine, but someone starts saying something that makes sense, he get hammered by like left and right, and scholars either take the thing off or I don't know. It's like, the hell.
I think what probably would be useful is perhaps a bit more transparency, so rather than players saying what they want and being angry when they can't get it, if we had some idea of what is possible, what's within the GM's powers, what they can and can't do, then perhaps some constructive sort of discussion and suggestions could be put forward, rather than what we have right now, which is, you know, to be honest, quite frustrating.
Trial and error, just give us this thing and see how it's gonna work for 2 months and then take it away, because everything's gonna be fixed when you take it away. It's just like,
well, in regards to the forum, any last words in terms of opinions or remarks you guys want to bring in? Because as people say, they try to give feedbacks in the forum, but it seems like they're constantly, how do you say, moderated, where it's as if it never existed, the you know, the advice or comments on how to improve. So any last words you guys want to add in?
Actually listen to the players.
Again, for me, it just comes down to transparency. There's a bit of you know, some sort of dissonance between the players and the GMs and publishers and whoever else, and we don't quite seem to know what's going on, what each party is, or what their goals and intentions are. So if we had some better communication, that would be a good thing.
Taking the buffer might be okay. It's a bit too late, so unless you have a major plan that you're gonna take the buff away and magically give me the ability of hitting imps and deleting them automatically, that would be cool.
Don't think that'll happen.
You mad?
But I need to fix the population. That's the best way to do it. Walk around and start killing level 1s and delete them.
Alright, so with that said, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I guess we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, see you guys.